Hello, in this video we're going to take a look at the onTAP user interface major components, and additional videos contain details on how to use each of the components, but we'll just go through an overview of each one. Starting from the home screen, we have a develop screen, and the development screen has an application open already at this point, and I should note that there are multiple pages to this screen, and each of these pages focuses on a particular task that we need to do in order to develop a boundary scan project. The projects page is where we simply browse and open a project. There's a projects list, so if there are projects that have already been completed, you can simply select that project and it will bring up a project without having to browse. There are a list of SVF files if you have an existing project, SVF files that exist in the project. So when the project is closed, you can select any SVF file and open it, and it will proceed through the pages on this screen. So if we have an open project, we could take a look at the scan page. The scan page is where BSDL files are assigned to JTAG parts on a printed circuit board, and once that assignment is made, the parts can be dragged and dropped into the right order so that you have a JTAG chain. Multiple chains are allowed. You can have as many as you like. And then once the scan page is set up, you would click OK, and you would go take a look at the non-scan page. The non-scan page has a list of nets ordered by pin count, because power and ground, which we need to assign, there's a menu to do so, are usually have quite a few pins. You can order them by nets as well. As far as non-boundary scan components, there's a list of those right here, and there's also a list of transparent models, all kinds of different types of models that allow, when assigned to parts in your non-JTAG list, allow the test generation software to make them transparent and find connections between scan pins. So when this is completed, when this page is completed, we would click OK. Then on the jumpers page, if there are connections on the board that are not included in a CAD net list, then you could specify those connections here. You could do, for example, pin to pin connects, and those connections would be listed here as jumpers and incorporated into the test solution. So when you click OK, that would take you to guards, and guards are constraints that can be placed on pins or devices, such as drive output low, drive output high, and these constraints are maintained throughout a test procedure, and they're particularly important during debug to prevent contention, for example, to turn off the data bus on a memory or flash device. The cluster page is used to set up cluster programs which functionally test non-JTAG parts, such as memory, I2C, and there is a video that covers this whole process and how to do it, what the DTS script programs look like that control cluster tests. There's a testability area that has some warnings based on the BSDL files and settings. There is a test gen page which contains a test plan, and it has a list in order of the items that will be run when an compiled SVF file is executed on the test screen. And for example, there's a state reset. You could have a optional hard reset. You could do a test access port test. You can do register segment initialization if you have segmented registers in your boundary register. For interconnect test, you can select, well, for cluster test, you can select what type of opcode is going to be assigned to each of the JTAG parts. So when you select an opcode, it will bring up all of the opcodes in that device's BSDL file, and then you can select whatever one you want. For example, bypass, xtest, and so on. And then there are lots of options. For example, whether or not you want to do a boundary register length test. Or if you're running a cluster test, you would open this and define the cluster test items. There are also quite a few available instructions that can be dragged and dropped into and inserted into the test plan. So if you had an external file, for example, you could drag that into here and put it wherever you need to. So then when you click Create Test, you will create an SVF file, and when that is done, you could go to the test screen, and on the test screen you can select which tests you want to run. For example, here we have 2 tests selected. You can deselect one, click Go, and it will run the test. And this is a message area that will tell us what tests ran, and if there are any failures, it would give us a diagnostic report. For example, if I insert a failure, it will, by setting a switch on the board, it will then come back and tell us what precisely that fault is. There are some other things. There are some operator controls, admin controls, some settings, the number of failing vectors, max failures that we would allow, and there are a number of controls here to, for example, to auto detect a screen, a JTAG chain. Take a look at the controller panel, which allows us to match up SVF files to controller channels. There are controls to view failures, reports, view settings such as burn-in. Do we want to do burn-in? Flash. Do we want to make some flash settings? So those are some of the things that can be done on the test screen, where you can select and order whatever SVF files you want and run them all with one click of the Go button. Another screen is ProScan. ProScan has a number of items, a list of all of the scans that are run, all of the vectors, and a list of all of the nets and pins, scan pins on the board. And for each scan pin, there is shown the values at each vector. Green is captured, yellow is drive. When you run the test, and you can run it with a command, the run command, if there are any failures, they would show up as red lines on the waveforms. And you can use that information to debug. You can browse through the net list using these list of devices, pins, nets on pins, which are linked down to this list here. And then for debug purposes, you can select pins and set guards here, recompile your test here, and run your test here. So you can iteratively go through a debug process. So that's kind of the ProScan screen. The other thing that's available is the menu bar, and there's a standard menu with the ability to open new projects, existing projects, select recently run files, and project folders and SVF files. There is a controllers menu, which we just looked at. But again, this allows you to match SVF file JTAG chains to channels on your USB controller. In the onTAP menu, there's a viewer item, and what you can do with that is select or match your own text editor so that that can be used to view any of the SVF or onTAP files. There are quite a few items and tools in the tools menu. You can do a BSDL syntax check. You can check the syntax in your DTS cluster test models. You can compose a netlist using just BSDL files. You can merge netlists. You can specify alternate ID codes that you might want to use for your tests. And you can edit existing ID codes as well with this control. Under debug, there is a number of things that help debug. One is show me, where if you have a cluster test, when you run the cluster test, this will show you all of the scans that are run at each of the cluster test instructions, and it will also show you the test values at each pin group, or variable in your cluster test model that you specify. Log TDO hex data will log all of the TAP data, TDI, TDO, and measure data at your TAP, and it will place it all in a scan data _ test name file in your project folder. Translators allow you to convert various types like binary data and SRecord data, flash data, to Intel hex format. I should note for translators that netlist CAD translators, CAD files, do not need to be translated, because onTAP automatically does that when it looks in a project folder and finds a CAD netlist and then translates it as it opens a project. Reports allows you to summarize and view test reports and puts them in a report subdirectory. Deploy collects all of your files that you need for manufacturing test and puts them in a test files for deployment subdirectory in your project folder. License allows you to check the status of your license, for example, support days, and also to specify different types of licenses, whether or not the license is in a dongle, USB dongle, or in a JTAG controller, or a network license manager. Help allows you to pick to access online help, onTAP help topics, of which there are quite a few. So that concludes our overview of the onTAP user interface. Thank you for watching.